Paul Chan says building homes is more important than building hotels. Police step up probe into Indonesian domestic helper abuse case. And does the U.S. intelligence reform go far enough?
Good evening. Secretary for Development Paul Chan says residential housing takes priority over the construction of new hotels, and that's despite government projections the supply of hotel rooms will fail to meet demand by 2017. Rani Samtani has more.
With tourism numbers expected to continue to increase in the coming years, hotel rooms will soon be in short supply. That's according to a government study on tourism. But Secretary for Development Paul Chan stressed today, as far as his bureau is concerned, the priority is to build more homes in order to meet the target of 470,000 units in 10 years.
Depending on the situations, if there is strong policy support for hotel-only developments, we would try to identify possible sites to address that needs. In terms of competing interests for land, from the government's standpoint, we have to rationalize our resources.
Executive Council convener Lam Woon Kwong noted many middle-class people are still unable to buy their own homes and that they feel the government neglected their needs in the chief executive's policy address. And Lam called a decision by former CE Tung Chee-hwa's government to suspend the construction of home ownership scheme flats a mistake. Lam described it as an overreaction to falling property prices between 1997 and 2003. And on plans to develop an East Lantau metropolis, the development chief played down concerns about the ecological impact.
The sensitive conservation area is mostly on the west of Lantau and the south of Lantau. So relatively speaking, the east side of Lantau Island is less challenging. That's why we have chosen this particular area. Also considering the proximity of East Lantau to Hong Kong Island, so that if we were to build a new town there, the infrastructure connection would be easier and the investment in infrastructure would be more cost effective.
The chief executive has proposed building a core business district there in addition to the ones in Central and Kowloon East. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
Hong Kong police will travel to Indonesia on Monday to take a statement from a 23-year-old domestic helper who claims to have been abused by her employer here. The Secretary for Security insists officers will treat the case seriously. Rachel Lung has more.
The case of the 23-year-old Indonesian foreign domestic worker allegedly tortured by her employer has sparked outrage. The helper, Ariana, has already returned to Indonesia. Secretary for Security Lai Tong-kwok stressed today the police will handle the case in a serious manner.
The police has been working hard on this case, collecting evidence from available information, and they have already asked the Indonesian police through the Interpol to make arrangements for them to go to Indonesia to conduct an in-depth interview with the injured lady so that they can obtain the necessary information and evidence to conduct a very full and detailed investigation of the case.
But the government rejected calls to allow foreign domestic helpers to live away from their employers, which some say could help to reduce the chances of them being abused. Secretary for Labor and Welfare Matthew Chung says such a move would defeat the purpose of importing helpers. More protests were held today as demonstrators condemned the alleged abuse. A concerned group rallied outside Ariana's employment agency. They called on members of the public to join hands in seeking justice for Ariana. Protesters say it is inhumane that the agency forced Ariana to stay with her abusive employer until her agency fee was paid off.
Normally, the practice is that the agency fee will keep them to pay back the money. monthly. It's also very much a normal practice that the agency keep the workers' passport and contract so that the domestic workers also feel they cannot go out.
The agency has denied claims the helper had to stay with her employer until its fee was paid off. Rachel Ling, TVB News.
Overseas, and U.S. President Barack Obama has called for an end to the government's control of phone data from hundreds of millions of Americans. And he's also pledged Washington would not monitor the communications of the heads of states of allies. Alan Booknia reports.
At a highly anticipated speech at the U.S. Justice Department, Obama suggested that phone data collected by intelligence agencies be moved outside government control. Obama also called for extending some privacy protections to foreign citizens whose communications may get scooped up by American spying. But he said it was necessary for American security that the surveillance continue, just with more oversight.
Now, the reforms I'm proposing today should give the American people greater confidence that their rights are being protected, even as our intelligence and law enforcement agencies maintain the tools they need to keep us safe.
Obama's speech comes after months of revelations about American spying leaked by former National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden. He's wanted in the U.S. for espionage and remains in Russia, where he has asylum.
The intelligence services of other countries, including some who feign surprise over the Snowden disclosures, are constantly probing our government and private sector networks and accelerating programs to listen to our conversations and intercept our emails.
But Obama
and
said the
compromise our
U.S. seems
systems.
to be held to a different standard.
No one expects China to have an open debate about their surveillance programs, or Russia to take privacy concerns of citizens in other places into account.
Reaction to Obama's proposals was mixed. A former technical director at the NSA agreed with most and said the spy agency could eliminate the bulk collection of almost all people by focusing on target collections.
We already know who the targets are. We can clearly go after those targets and anyone who falls into a zone of suspicion around those targets.
Privacy advocates, however, said Obama's proposals didn't go far enough.
The NSA surveillance programs are so out of control in so many areas that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit to try to make them a little better. And I think that it's fair to say that Obama has picked up some of this low-hanging fruit, but I don't think we should misunderstand the size of the problem. The NSA
Alan Booknia,
has
TVB News.
overstepped its bounds.
To Afghanistan now, where the Taliban unleashed a deadly suicide bomb attack last night in the capital of Kabul. The explosion rocked a popular restaurant for Westerners, leaving at least 21 people dead. It was 7:30 local time at night when gunshots rang out inside the Lebanese restaurant Taverna. Islamist Taliban insurgents specifically targeted the location because it hosts many embassies and caters to expatriates. To ensure mass casualties, right after a suicide bomber blew himself up outside, 2 other gunmen ran in and began spraying people with bullets.
According to our primarily investigation, 3 terrorists, one was able to explode the explosive that he had brought with him, and 2 others were trying to enter the restaurant. They were faced with the security guards in the area. 2 of them have been killed.
The International Monetary Fund's local representative and 4 United Nations staff were among the dead, which included more than a dozen foreign nationals. UN officials condemned the brazen attack.
These sorts of attacks which focus and which target civilian locations are unacceptable, and we call for their immediate halt. And we emphasise these can be described, and they are, gross violations of international humanitarian law.
As this cook ran away from the scene, he said he could hear diners being gunned down, including his manager. The other cook confirms very few escaped alive.
When I worked in the kitchen, we heard some explosion outside. And then we escaped, all the guys escaped up.
British and American nationals were among the dead. Last night's bombing serves as a reminder that foreigners should never let their guard down in Afghanistan. Anti-government demonstrations continued in Bangkok today, one day after one person was killed and more than 30 were injured when a grenade was thrown into the middle of a protest march. Thousands of anti-government protesters rallied in and around the National Police Headquarters compound. The movement is trying to force the resignation of caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. They see her as a puppet to her brother, ousted Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. The opposition Democrats are refusing to participate in an election called for February 2nd.
The wife of an Indian government minister has been found dead in a hotel room in New Delhi. It follows claims her husband was having an affair. Media reports out of India say Sunanda Pushkar committed suicide. She was married to Shashi Tharoor, one of the country's best-known politicians. Their marriage made headlines earlier in the week when she allegedly tweeted that her husband was having an affair with the Pakistani journalist. The tweets also accused the journalist of being a spy. The couple then issued a statement saying they were happily married and the tweets were unauthorized. Tharoor previously worked at the United Nations and was among those considered for the Secretary General job, which eventually went to Ban Ki-moon. He later joined Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's government. Still to come in the news tonight, Vladimir Putin says homosexuals won't face discrimination at the Winter Olympics. Health chief favors public-private partnership over colorectal cancer screening, and Roger Federer advances down under.